start this new session. My name is Vanda, Nunes de Lima. I'm working at the GRC, and I'm part of the Inspire team, being coordinator of the data specifications development. So things are difficult, so you can somehow blame on my team. And now I'm involved in the group dealing with implementation and maintenance of Inspire, and using it by using it for other policies. So we are now here, the first present ready. Before we start the first presentation, I think it's good if we can have at least one question at the end of each presentation, and to be sure that all has the opportunity to have at least one question, and to leave to the end of the session other questions that can be addressed either to each one of the presenters or something more general, dealing with the topic of the session. So I give you the floor, just like this, we go faster, don't lose time.
Okay.
Yes?
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
My name is Marcin Grudzień. I represent Head Office of Geodesy and Cartography, which is a Polish national mapping and cadastral authority. And I'll give you the short presentation about the recent developments which were made in our project called GeoPortal 2. And these were the developments that contribute to the building of our national spatial data infrastructure. So I'll start my presentation with a short description of the project. Then I'll tell you a little bit about the data set and services that we deliver. Then I'll tell you more about some usage of our network services. Next part of the presentation will be about some developments which are maybe not really Inspire fully conformant, but they definitely supplement the building of SDI in Poland. And in the end, I will tell you a little bit about our plans for the future. I'm not going to describe the project into detail. I only say that the main goal of the project is to provide to citizen, business, and public administration access to public registers containing high quality and reliable data using web services. What's important that the budget of the project is quite substantial. It is almost 30 million euros. The project is ending in the beginning of next year, so it is a good opportunity to summarize the deliverables of the project on the conference like this. More information about the project you'll find on our website. The website is also an entry point to most of the services and applications that we creating during the project. Okay, so let's start with this data set and services. Here you can have some small statistics showing the number of network services that we publish. It's over 100. Additionally, there is around 100 external services which are connected to our GeoPortal. So it's quite a lot. You can get then access to the network services, for example, in our GeoPortal applications, but I'm not going to describe these applications right now for you because there will be further today presentation of my colleague covering this area. This is the list of the data sources that we publish. It's all, of course, the list is not complete. So there is a wide variety of data sets. We probably publish almost all data sets that we have right now in my organization. So there's like vector, raster data, topographic, cadastral, and many more. Altogether, right now we publish around 29 terabytes of data. And we also publish some Inspire harmonized data sets. This is the list of the Inspire teams that my organization is responsible for in Poland. and this is the list of harmonized data sets. And right now we publish network services for Annex 1, 5 Annex 1 teams. But if you are also interested in this harmonization process in Poland, so how we deal with the harmonization in Poland, I encourage you to take a look on my presentation from one of the Monday's workshops. When we take a look on the most important Inspire milestones, we'll see that we did really a lot. So we accomplished most of the Inspire goals, milestones. There are two things actually that we have to do to be like fully Inspire conformant. We have to launch the network services for harmonized data for annexes 2 and 3, and of course we have to make our other types of services conformant to the special data services Inspire regulation. Some statistics. Actually, we are very proud of the statistics. I'm not sure whether you can see it. It's a statistic from the beginning of the last year showing the number of requests per day. As you can see, we started with around 2 million requests in the beginning of last year. Now we have on average around 10 million requests per day to our network services. And there are some peak days where the number of requests exceeds 15 million. So it's quite good. And here's the similar statistic, but this time showing the number of unique IP addresses accessing our network services. So very similarly, in the beginning of the last year, we started with around 5,000-6,000 unique IP addresses accessing our network services, and now we have around 27,000 on average unique IP addresses accessing our network services. So it's also huge growth. And this is a statistic showing some response times of our services. This is statistic from April this year. So as you can see, the responses to 84% of requests is sent to the user within 1 second. So we think that the statistic is quite good, but we still continuously working on the improvement of performance of our network services, because there is a huge growing demand for our network services. And some other developments that might be interesting to you. So one of the first of our developments was the building a geoportal application on mobile devices. So this application is available for 3 main mobile platforms. You can download it for free and use it for free. So you don't need to log in and provide some password or anything like that. But even if you don't want to download the application, there is also mobile version of our application working on the mobile devices in the web browser. So here, this version of application supports touch interface, of course, and supports localization services. Next set of developments is related to the addresses registers. It turned out that this is the register that is most commonly used in Poland by different type of public organization, not necessarily organization that are connected to this geospatial world. So there was a huge demand for applications and services like that. Therefore, we, for example, created the Go coding services for some organization. However, some other organization wanted to do something extra. So they wanted to download actually the addresses databases and implement them on their own site. Therefore, we created such download services, but this organization didn't, by the way, we had like WFS service providing this data, but these organizations told us that GML is too complex, they don't understand this WFS idea, and so on. Therefore, we had to come up with something simpler, so we produced a service that is very simple. It delivers the addresses data in the very flex, very user-friendly, simple structure. Next development is called GeoPortal API. It's more or less something very similar to Google API. So it's a like component that you can embed on any website and publish like small version of our GeoPortal with some limited functionality on any website. Statistical module, it's a next development. It allows user to visualize any type of statistical data using our official state boundary register as a background. So all you have to do is to fill the Excel template, send the Excel template, and visualize the data using cartograms, cartodiagrams, using different symbology. This is the address of this module. And one of the earliest developments of our portal were addressing the problem with metadata, problem, because there was a huge demand in Poland for creation of metadata, different types of metadata, but the quality of metadata provided by the different organization was, well, how to say, it wasn't perfect. Therefore, we decided to create metadata editor, actually to standardize the metadata production in Poland, and we also provided a metadata validator that validates quality of metadata checks the quality of the metadata against some requirements that were provided in different profiles, either Inspire profile or some national metadata profiles that we implemented. A very important part of the project, I think that was the biggest sub-project within the GeoPortal project, was called Universal Map Module. It's basically set of application and services that were designed, that was crafted for the purposes of Polish emergency services. So to supplement like business processes of emergency services in Poland. And I'm not going to, again, describe it into detail. It's very interesting, but it was covered in yesterday's presentation of my colleague Agnieszka Gruchała. So if you are interested, then please take a look on this presentation. And the other product is called SDA module. It's also set of application, but this time it was designed for the organization that have some special data, but they don't know how to publish it, how to make it available to the user. So this SDI module allows this organization to install the software and then start providing special data in this harmonized, standardized way. And this module is, of course, freely available for all public organizations in Poland. What's behind the GeoPortal? Because as you would probably notice, there are a lot of tools, a lot of applications, a lot of services that we developed. So we had to provide the hardware, actually infrastructure to run all this. So we have approximately 212 virtual machines. They are using 2.08 terabytes of RAM and 812 CPU cores. That's quite a lot. And in order to provide such a powerful infrastructure, we have to basically change everything. So we had to invest in new servers, new network tools like firewalls, load balancers, new database platform, new storages, and many more. Some of these components we actually upgraded during the period of the project for several times. So it was a huge effort, especially that because the interest in our services was growing so fast. And we also have to change the organization. So we implemented ITIL best practices into our organization. So to actually deal with such a powerful infrastructure, to be able to manage it somehow. So we now have professional service desks, and we have implemented incident change and problem management procedures in my organization. And plans for the future. So, of course, there are right now a lot of 3D LiDAR data captured in Poland. Therefore, we are thinking about providing this data to our users in user-friendly, easy to understand way, and of course also attractive way. We are thinking about publication further network service, either for the purposes of publication national data sets or inspired data sets. And we are finally thinking about finally finishing our internal shop. But the biggest development is called CAPAP. Is a Polish acronym for Analytical Center for Public Administration. We basically identified gap on the market that we noticed that there are a number of public organizations in Poland that are interested in using special data. However, they don't have skills, they don't have people, sometimes they don't have money to do so, or sometimes there are some other obstacles. And we decided to create such analytical center for them. It will be like, again, set of components, applications, services that will provide some special services for public administration organization in order to supplement their business processes and to, for example, support decision-making process in these organizations. Okay, and that's all. I'm leaving the summary of my presentation to you. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you for this. Thank you. Very interesting presentation showing the role of the geoportal and the innovative services that are constructed and based on that. Okay. So, any question from the audience? No? Okay, probably you have the opportunity at the end, because it's really a good example how move things, and as we see in the past presentations that training, capacity building on public administration is an issue. It's very nice, your plans for future. So I give the floor for the second presenter, Haico van der Weg. Thank you.
Can you help me? I'm struggling. Okay, it's too short. Okay. Yeah, it's getting loose again.
Loosen a little bit?
No, it's don't fix that. No, it's getting loose again.
Too tight.
Yeah, probably. Okay.
Good.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. All right, welcome. My name is Haico van der Vegt. I work in the Cadastre and Land Registry and Mapping Agency of the Netherlands. And I want to tell you more about our developments in a national geoportal and the new Environmental Planning Act that is coming up and is being developed. Okay, short outline. One slide about Inspire, because I don't need to tell you about it, but it's just some background. And some slides about PDOK, our geoportal, but especially on the Environmental Planning Act and the position of our national portal in this Planning Act. Okay, well, Inspire came to us 2006, 7, whatever. It's about content, 34 themes of your environment. It's about metadata, so data can be found and services can be found. It's about web services, so data is and services are accessible. It's also about quality of service, of course. It's availability, capacity, performance, and you need to report on implementation and monitor the usage. So this was coming at us 2007, and then on a government level we said, well, we shouldn't do it alone, we should work together on that. So that at that time the idea started for this PDOK, the name of our portal. It's something like public services on a map. It's a bad translation, but anyway, it's a partnership. That's my message. It's the Ministry of Infrastructure and Environment, responsible for 3 themes. Ministry of Economic Affairs, 9 themes. Our National Road Authority, something like 8 themes. The Cadastre themselves, 12 themes. And last but not least, Geonovum, and they are our NSDI Executive Committee. So they have a very strong coordinating role when it comes to Inspire in the Netherlands. Okay, so PDOK, I don't go into all the technical details because that's not relevant for this presentation. The highlights, like I said, it's a geoportal, geo-information distribution. It's a facility, a common facility used by a number of government agencies, serving web services, of course, but also on the backside there is a service desk, so there is full support, there are maintenance plans, and there's further development to improve the portal. And the architecture is such that it's future-proof, it is scalable, so when there is a large demand, we can scale up, and it's secure. Well, like I said, Inspire was driving this. I mean, this was the biggest thing. And already said, it's a partnership of public organizations, and as such, it is part of our spatial data infrastructure in the Netherlands. But the public spatial data infrastructure, because it's much bigger, of course. Of course, using international or national GI standards where relevant, open source based, components based, so we can scale up and change and be flexible whenever needed. So we are, let's say PDOK is the service provider for Inspire, but also for other big national data sets like key registers for addresses, cadastre, topography, buildings, well, name it. You can access it and have a look at pdok.nl. But now some reasons behind it, because I said we wanted to work together to face this challenge of Inspire coming at us together. And from a partner, so the 4 or 5 partners within PDOK, from that point of view, it's about efficiency. You don't want to invent the wheel of Inspire every time. So we said, let's work together and, oops, invent this wheel only once. Yeah. But it's also about the data delivery of the key registers, because these are very big national data sets. You need a lot of power, a lot of web services, different kind of web services to deliver this to whatever user there is. And also an important reason is because these partners work together quite closely. It's like exchanging every time, you know, your data, the geographic data in your daily work processes, and now you can just get them from a central common facility instead of sending or developing your own. From the ministry point of view, so from a political point of view, PDOK was designed as the Dutch Inspire hub. So it's about supply optimization. Create a common facility where every public organization dealing and producing with geographic information can publish their data through. So it's Inspire. Like I said, it's also the key registers, as said. And it's our way to push open data as well. I think 95 or maybe even more of all the data sets that are in are open data. So open unless, that's the policy. Okay. Well, some short facts and figures. 71 national data sets at the moment, divided in, whatever, view servers or download servers. In 2013 we had 580 million map requests over the year, of which 60% is unknown. The business model of PDOK, maybe a side step, is that you have the PDOK government, who can access everything. You have education, who can access everything but doesn't have real support. And you have the fair use, which is, you can access everything except the restricted web services. And you don't have real support. Last thing is, now more than 365 public organizations are registered to use PDOK. And now a step, aside from the portal and from Inspire, is about environmental planning in the Netherlands. I guess that you can recognize a lot of these issues when it comes to planning. So when you want to build something, when you want to start a company or a shop or whatever, it's a very complex and fragmented situation about rules, laws, regulations. So there are a lot of restrictions. It's not clear what the planning is of that area. That's one thing, complex, fragmented. Another thing is that it's not, it doesn't have a real user perspective. So when you want to do something, when you want to apply for a building permit, it looks like a maze. It's a lot of regulations, a lot of organizations you have to attend and ask the question and fill in papers. So it's also a very big administrative burden. That will not change right away, so it needs time. But that's why last year, 2 years, this is a pain. The new thinking came up to completely change this environmental planning and try to combine many of these existing laws into one law, and should be really user focused. And user doesn't mean only the government, but also the one who applies for a permit or whatever. The stakeholders, so your neighbor, when you're building a house or rebuilding your house, he's a stakeholder, maybe he doesn't like it. And the government, so the one who needs to approve your application. So a lot of legal stuff needed to, and it's still going on. But that's not my focus. My focus is on the more the information infrastructure side. So the Environmental Planning Act should give better access to relevant data of your surrounding, so the environment you live in. Like I said, citizen, company, government, should be good quality. It's like an open door, but a one-stop shop, demand-driven, and also very important because all of these European regulations should now be combined into this Environmental Planning Act. So it's about the information infrastructure. That's the part I want to stress. And that's why we came up with a sort of metaphor. And it has been explained quite in detail in the workshop on Tuesday afternoon as well. It's the avenue of the environment. Well, what's the concept? well, the picture explains it. It's a distribution channel of all relevant environmental themes you need as a user to do your thing. I mean, to approve, to apply, to object, whatever. So it's all public organizations who are dealing with environmental data. A critical and fundamental thing is that all the data is stored and managed in information houses, and I can come back to that later. It needs to consistent quality. That's one of the parameters and requirements. So, what data is available? Can I use it? And can I trust it? Especially the government says, can I trust it? So the reliability. Like I said, user or usage focused. So he's the one in the middle. So everything that is developed needs to be, well, sort of easy for the user. Easy access, and of course, always the big bottleneck is the financing, but I'm not going into that in detail. So a very simplistic view of this avenue of the environment. You have this avenue, fancy road, street, whatever. This is the distribution infrastructure. You have these houses, all different kind of themes like noise, water, nature, reference data, air, soil, safety. Well, maybe others come up, space, construction, building, whatever. But it's focused on one theme. Of course, and at the back end, there are these delivering data sets which deliver the data to this information house. So the applicant, or the user in general, can be government as well, requests information and gets it back. Well, there's a very simplistic overview, of course. So this information house, a little bit more detail on that. Like I said, it's about the environment. That's the key thing, and it's about environmental planning. So it's one theme combined in one house. But when you have this metaphor of this house, well, you need to decide on different kind of roles. So the organization, who's the owner or the responsibility, the management, the daily management, who are the dwellers or the partners, financing, when something is broken, how do you deal with this? Expertise or knowledge. You have to decide on which data set form are the basic data of this house. And when you talk about source data coming in, you need to deal with validation and agreements on standards and so on, these kind of things, quality standards. You also need to agree on which information products you want to serve and provide. Is it just the data set as it comes in, or do you tune it or tweak it or combine it with others and serve it as another product? Of course, validation is here before it goes out. You need to validate it, but also the connection to the, let's say, the avenue or the distribution infrastructure is quite important. And there are many other things when you're living in a house to deal with. To give you a bit of a flavor of the number of how Inspire is connected, because it's about the environment. So Inspire is 100% connected. I mean, it's the environmental planning act is a sort of use case for Inspire in this way. As you see, the theme noise is represented in 3 Inspire themes, air in 5. Well, I don't read them all, but Inspire is heavily involved. And when I say Inspire is heavily involved, it means that PDOK, as our distribution facility, as our portal, is very much involved as well. Okay, so first the simple picture of this avenue. So what is the role of PDOK? Because that is one of the things I want to stress. It's all in development yet, still. I mean, so it needs to be finalized. But it's a lot of thinking about how do we, in a sort of architecture way, plan this. you can see it like this as well. There's a side road and a sort of roundabout, you know, a sort of central hub, a facility that is responsible for disclosing information from the houses around the roundabout, and so not every house has its own infrastructure to build. No, you can use a common facility, and there are more of these roundabouts, of course. It's not just one, there are more. And we have to decide on which existing infrastructure you can use, because that is really important, to use the existing stuff. So what could be the role? Well, it's not a big surprise, I guess, but that is what PDOK should do. At least in my opinion, being the central hub, being the distribution node for environmental information. So when a user wants information, goes to PDOK. PDOK makes sure that the information of this case, the theme noise, gets the information, sends it back to the user. Very simplistic, of course, but this is the way we're thinking about this avenue of our environment. So, to summarize, the Environmental Planning Act and our national portal. Well, as said, PDOK is already the INSPIRE compliant service provider for 4 or 5 public organizations, and this will grow. And that means that we should use not only the infrastructure but also the knowledge of how to work together and create such a common facility, common platform, and deliver, inspire, and other environmental information. And that means that you need, but it's not clear yet, but we need to connect the information coming from all of these houses. So also from one node to another node. I mean, it's not only PDOK, as I said, that is used within the infrastructure. Okay, this is what I wanted to tell you. So, thank you.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. You show another part of the overall picture that was presented in this very good workshop we had Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yes. Any question from here, there, and yeah? Okay.
Yes. Good morning. My name is Andreas Hagioraftis. I represent the Department of Land and Surveys of Cyprus.
Okay.
I understand from your presentation that you have a number of services or key registers that
Yes.
offering data to INSPIRE mainly.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering which organization is legally responsible for coordinating and implementing the whole thing. I understand there are 5 organizations. You mentioned Cadastre and some other ministries participating in PDOK, but who is legally responsible for coordinating this?
Well, as far as I know, that is our Ministry of Environment and Infrastructure. They are let's say, the owner of the whole system. And we have a program board who's dealing with the daily issues, you know, which data sets should be in. But to answer your question, that is the Ministry of Environment and Infrastructure. They are the owner.
And then what is the role of Geonovum in this case?
Geonovum is coordinating before. PDOK is already running for 1.5 years now. It's fully sustained financially as well. But before that, we had 4 years of a program to develop PDOK. And Geonovum had a very central position in coordinating all the activities between the partners. But Geonovum has in general, a very central position when it comes to coordinating all INSPIRE activities. So they are the ones who decide, well, not decide, but appoint, maybe it's a better word, appoint which organization is responsible for what INSPIRE theme. So in that way, they are they are very important and central position.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. My question is kind of a similar one. It has to do with the roundabouts and the houses. What's the granularity level? Are these, let's say, set of organizations or public sector bodies?
Well, at least public sector bodies.
At least public sector bodies.
So one house can have 5 to 10
PSBs.
Public organizations who deliver information to this house.
And is there a common licensing policy and rights acquisition policy?
That's quite a difficult one. No, there isn't. But because, well, we have in the Netherlands, we have this open unless policy. But of course, well, I'm from cadastre, so the cadastral information is, well, you have to pay for it. So there are no common agreements yet. But yeah, I think if we want to be part of it, it needs to be developed anyway.
Any other question? No, if not, we pass to the third presentation. Mr. Prodromos Tsiavos, if I pronounce well your name.
I leave you dealing with it.
Yeah, I'm trying my best. It seems to be very easy.
If you talk with easy, it's the same. If you use this one.
It would be nice if we could sing as well.
The other side. That one?
Yeah. 1, 2. Yeah. Oh well.
We have talent.
Just use the other one.
Or not really.
Just put it in your pocket.
Yep. All right. What I'm going to present now is pretty much the work we've been doing the past 4 years in relation to the development of the national spatial data information infrastructure in Greece. And I'm the last one in this group. I'm a legal advisor, and I have done this work for the ministry at the time, the HEMCO, the Hellenic Mapping Agency and Cadastre, and also the Ministry of Environment. And these people that are here that we did the paper together, they have worked on the relevant legislation. So what I'm going to try to describe is pretty much what was the administrative structure of the implementation of the Inspire Directive in Greece, and why it hasn't really worked, basically, and where we are right now, and what we could be doing in the future. So I'll start with a bit of the landscape of what the situation is, or what the situation also was when the directive was implemented. The directive was implemented only in 2010. Then some issues that appear and seem to be common issues, and they derive out of empirical research we did with public sector bodies participating in the implementation of the directive. Then number three is going to be the core of the presentation, which is pretty much the structure. So that's why I was so interested in the Dutch case, because it's a kind of a similar idea. Then the problems we have and why we have these problems, and where we are now, and what we think we could be doing in order to try to resolve some of these issues. Whenever we talk about the issues of the Inspire Directive, almost invariably we end up with these difficult questions about how we open, what we open, whether we open. But we should always bear in mind that the Inspire Directive is far beyond, in a sense, it's bigger, in another sense it's smaller, is narrower than any reuse directive or reuse legislation. It's bigger because it doesn't only cover dissemination of data, but also covers acquisition and sharing. So in that sense, it has a greater regulatory scope compared to the public sector information legislation. It's narrower because it refers to a very specific type of information, geospatial information. But it always ends up to this question: how open should we be, both in terms of sharing the information we have as government or as public sector bodies, and how open should we be when we release information to third parties. So let's try to think a bit about the landscape of Greece at the time of this of this implementation. So if you see this, the Greek regulatory ecology, what you see is that you have the geodata legislation, which is Law 38/2010, which is the law implementing the INSPIRE directive, but this did not come in a vacuum. So we had, in a sense, to align it with different types of things happening, which were not all complete. So in the middle, not very surprisingly, there was a law which actually talked about the standards and the interoperability standards with regards to how public information in general, including geospatial information, should be exposed and how it should be shared amongst public sector bodies and what it really meant in terms of the technical features it should have when it is released. Then we had also the Law 34/48, which was the Public Sector Information Directive implementation, the previous one, the 2003 directive. And then you had two more interesting pieces of legislation. One that came after the geodata legislation, which was an e-government bill, which pretty much encompassed all elements of e-government, and in that sense also included information about regulations about environmental and geospatial information in general. And then a law that we call the Transparency Law, which actually introduced a new norm in the Greek legal ecosystem, which is release publicly whatever public information you have. And this was quite important because quite a bit of the administrative information that is released contained geodata. So this is the landscape where this whole thing was to come in. So in the period between 2010 and 2012, which is the period for which we have conducted some research in order to see what was the impact of introducing this new piece of legislation, we had over 4,000 geodata sets being released. Of course, the number is big, but it could be much smaller if you aggregate. So it really depends how you break it down, just to go to your slide that you had before. We have over 2,500 what we call focal point contacts members, and you will see later what the FPCs are. FPC is something similar to your roundabout. So we had over 2,500 public servants participating in these hubs. Pretty much all ministries were part of the infrastructure, all decentralized administrations, all the regions, 92% of the municipalities, and 72% of the public servants participating in this infrastructure had at least tertiary education, which means we were working with a pretty well-educated group of people. So in terms of the landscape, if you see these numbers, it seems pretty good. In fact, it wasn't that good, and we tried to see what happened and how this whole thing stopped. So the issue is, and it seemed like from the questionnaires we gave to these people, 86.3% of them, they thought there is tremendous lack of data sharing between public sector bodies within the Greek administration. And the same amount of people also indicated that there is need for data sharing. So they both indicated that there wasn't, but at the same time there is need for data sharing, and this remains up. I mean, when the study was completed, it's still they haven't. This was when the question was asked. So 2 years after the law has been implemented, there was not much. The vast majority of people believed that there was no real data sharing, and 97% of the public servants believe that data should be simply open and free. And the reason why this comes here is pretty much because most of these people really require data in order to perform their daily tasks. So in order to perform their public tasks, they needed to have data. One option, and this is the option that the current legislative framework promotes, is to differentiate between sharing and distributing. So you have more relaxed framework with regards to sharing. And then with regards to how you distribute, then you have different variations. The problem is that none of the two norms has been implemented at the licensing level. And I'll explain to you later why. As a result, people felt that they were more likely, it was better for the public sector bodies to have all data open rather than having to choose between two different sets of licenses. One internally inward looking for the public sector bodies, and then one outward looking, which was for the third parties, the private sector. They thought that it was much better to have a single set, make it as open as possible, don't make me to make any choices, just make this thing open, let me do my job. And we see that a lot in the regional and local level, again, because these are people that have great need of geospatial data, and they tend to procure those data multiple times, precisely because the licensing terms are not favorable or they do not allow sharing. Now let's see a bit what the structure looks like. So the Greek Inspire implementation pretty much has at its top the National Committee of Geospatial Information. This is a committee which comprises of representatives of the core ministries and agencies that either produce or use geospatial data. And this is the highest ranking instrument. These are the ones that are supposed to be actually producing the national geospatial policies. They are overseen by the Minister of Environment, and this whole committee is under the Prime Minister. So when under the original version of the implementation of the Inspire Directive, we created this committee, which we thought it should be at the highest possible level, so that they actually could implement policies that cut across ministries. The problem that you very frequently have is that if you have only a sectoral type of competency, then very frequently you cannot do things. This was a good idea in its concept. It was a very bad idea in how it has been implemented. And I'll return that to my last slide, but I'll just reveal you the secret. In order for its decision to be legally valid, it needed an approval by the cabinet. And for this to, not any decision, the decisions that have to do with the implementation of the policy. And this was a major bottleneck. So we never managed to have the national policy, precisely because the cabinet never approved it. For political reasons. This committee, because it was a committee comprising mostly out from people of at the political level, needed to get some recommendations by a more operational organization. And this organization is was the Hellenic Mapping and Cadastral Organization, HEMCO, which together with the Cadastre SA at the time were the two organizations pretty much doing most of the cadastral work in Greece. The HEMCO was also doing the archiving part, and it's the oldest organization doing this kind of work in Greece. So this is the one which had more public nature, a public task nature, compared to the Cadastre SA, which had a more operational and private nature. Now, under this HEMCO, there were a number of what I mentioned before, focal points of contact, the FPCs. Now, an FPC is essentially a unit which is outside the hierarchy, so it's a working group, administratively speaking, which comprises of people that have expertise in geodata, and it pretty much organizes the work of different public sector bodies that own or are custodians of data. And these data custodians may be individual organizations or ministries, and focal points of contact, there are up to 5 per ministry. In terms of local administration and regional administration, there is only 1 focal point per government unit. So this was a structure which was quite useful, because it first of all allowed people to go a bit outside the hierarchy, and you were able to attract people that actually had expertise. And I think this was a very nice idea in terms of coordinating. They were not to actually manage the data. They were just to support the data custodians. So for instance, if I were a ministry and I had an agency that produced forest data, then and then I had an agency that produced environmental data, those two, they would actually go under one of the FCPs of the ministry, and their work would be coordinated. And they would be the ones that would give information as to how you are going to implement the Inspire Directive, how you coordinate different actions, and then the data custodians could decide whether they're going to charge or not, whether they're going to release or not. But in order to make such decisions, they needed the national spatial policy. And because we could not have the approval by the cabinets, this was very difficult. So they had a legal vacuum here when they were actually to release the data. What they did, they would release the data under the existing legislation, which would be the general PSI legislation. And that's why I showed you in the first diagram that this law didn't come in a vacuum. So they would go up to the point where they were to choose the data but that they're going to release, but they couldn't have, there wasn't a uniform policy as they would do it. Now, the other interesting part is that the FPCs would also help a lot with procurement. And in Greece, this was particularly relevant because what happened is when we had the procurement of spatial data, very frequently the license under which the data were procured were pretty lousy. So you would get a license that would only allow, let's say, one little municipality to use it, but not another. Or the ministry, the central agency, the services of a central ministry, but not of the local government. And there was no correlation between the price and the licensing type. So the focal points tried a lot to work with the data custodians as to how they would procure. And they also tried, they were very much supported by HEMCO, which issued very detailed instructions as to how you procure, what you should be looking for, etc. Now, when they would actually the way it would work, the whole system, or the way it actually works still, besides the problems, is that you have the public sector bodies that you see on the green box on the right. They share with each other with no restrictions. But when they are to release outside to third parties, this is the point where they need to have some kind of pricing policy. So there is a default about how you share with each other, but then you need to have the third-party policies, which is the issue that you have. Now, the whole idea is to create a virtuous cycle. So the idea is that you actually get to have the public sectors getting the data from a vendor or a contractor, and then they share with each other. And from the third parties, if a third party, which is a private organization, also wishes to take part in this infrastructure, as long as they adhere to the standards, they can always do that. So in a sense, the idea is to constantly expand this infrastructure. Now, what were the biggest problems? The first, I mentioned before, was the fact that we never managed to get the cabinet's decision. We had 2 meetings of this committee. In the last committee, we also had licenses for sharing and licenses for releasing data. But then what happened was that the HEMCO was closed down. And it was actually became part of a new form of cadastre, the National Cadastre and Mapping Agency SA, and the Ministry of Environment. So some competences went to the Ministry of Environment, the ones that related to the public task. The ones that related to exploitation went to NCMA. But the problem with this one, which happened last summer, I think in 2013, is that it never managed to really clarify the issue of what happened with the role of HEMCO advising the committee. So what happened with this closing down of HEMCO was that the whole thing was left high and dry, basically, and that's why there is no national SDI policy. The biggest problem is that if this, as long as this thing continues, the focal points die. Because people try to do their work, but they are lacking the organization of the state. They are working groups, don't forget that. So they are lacking the organization which is going to support them. So I think this was a major problem. Now, why did this thing happen? There was no political support or wider support. There was no real understanding of the issue, and that's why it's a very esoteric. Inspire tends to have very practical implications, but it's a very esoteric piece of legislation. So it's very difficult to communicate to policymakers. It's very difficult to communicate to the general audience. So it's very difficult to explain why it's so crucial for things you do every time. Of course, this happened also because there was this bottleneck, which it worked in other jurisdictions, but in Greece it wouldn't work because of the whole political situation over the last 4 years. The other thing is that infrastructure to support the focal points there is an infrastructure that was actually being produced through the regular funds of the HEMCO, but there was also a structural fund aimed at supporting the work of the focal points. But this is so bureaucratic, it takes so much time to be implemented that basically it kills the process as well. So in the recent history, we had 2 times HEMCO or Cadastre SA or the Ministry of Environment trying to implement such infrastructures through structural funds, but because of the delays in actually implementing such project, they were always killed. So if I were to be asked again how to do it, I would say don't use structural funds. Just do it with your own money, even if it's a very little thing. It's a much smaller thing. Just don't go big. Try to go small. And of course, we had a lack of socio-material and political conditions. So the infrastructure was not there, the political will was not there. So once we had, the law was in place, the funding instrument was in place, but it couldn't move on. So what are the prospects now? Now, I think the primary, the easiest thing to do is to try to amend Law 3882 so as to remove the bottlenecks. Very simple, at least in principle. We have some suggestions, and this could be done through the, I'm going to the third bullet. We are now passing an open data law, which is the implementation of the new PSI directive. So our suggestion is to actually, as a group, to make amendments there, remove the bottlenecks, don't require a cabinet decision, let the committee take the decisions on its own, but have a uniform policy. There is a great internal debate as whether the public sector bodies should make a decision on their own as to how they release the data or not. I'm personally very much against having the PSBs making a totally on their own decision, because it's going to lead to chaotic behavior, and you're not going to have coordination between the licensing regime. We also have this phenomenon, which I personally, as an academic, I always warn against, which is every PSB wants to make their own open license. Just don't do it. There are simple licenses out there. Just use one of the Creative Commons licenses and do your job. The second bullet, which is also important, is that there are public sector bodies which continue violating the law. Even when the law is explicit as to how you should release the information, they just ignore it. And I don't want to name ones, but there are certain ones that have a lot of data, and they tend consistently to do that. And I think the next stage is to actually make to actually call the public administration inspector. I think that's the final stage. Now, I'll go to the last thing, and I'll say that we did the law with regards to the implementation of the Inspire Directive. I've been involved in several other legislative committees, and we have tried this network of non-hierarchical networks of experts, which really work. I think it's a fantastic idea to try to make hubs of infrastructure, but also hubs of people, and create these communities of public servants within the public administration. For instance, this happened a lot with another project called Transparency, where you have certain authorities doing such work, and I think there should be some kind of attempt to strengthen the work of the FPCs, and also see whether we can combine them with the work that happens in other similar groups. I would say that is part of the obligations of the country with regards to the Open Government Partnership to resolve this issue within the next 2 years. And finally, it's important to have more focused interventions. Just don't focus just on the central government. Pay a lot of attention to the regions, because this is where the whole policy is actually shifting gradually. So we have to figure out how we balance between central government decisions and regional government's implementations. And action plans at the regional level have been implemented, for instance, in Crete. We need to see how we can use that in different regions in Greece. So that's pretty much it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Impressive, your presentation. So going to a different reality, and this is part of the, let's say, learning together how to progress. Each country has his own example. Any question from the audience? Yes, one?
Thank you. My name is Konrad Hoyos. You explained a lot of problems with the institution side, with the policy side. Are you now in conflict with the INSPIRE regulation?
No. Unfortunately, no.
So would you like to have more pressure so that Brussels obliges you and says, okay, please,
I can speak only not off the record on this one, but I would love to see more pressure on implementing open policies. But this is something, as an academic, again, I have tried several times to highlight to the institutions I work with that this is not, I mean, it's not in the interest of the institutions to just tick boxes, but try to actually implement something that helps. I'm not sure whether Brussels has the instruments to do it. They're very slow.
Yeah, probably I've just a word. Probably not focus only or too much on the licensing aspect, because this is an issue that is faced by member states in general, and by showing the benefits of having something, as you said, do small, then give the possibility to grow, can be a way to break some bricks, and yeah.
Yeah, I think we try.
I think we need to move over. We are a little bit late, and you go to the next presentation. I give the floor to Panagiotis Ciceli. Sorry for my poor presentation.
Θα το βάλετε. Can you help me? Okay. Okay.
That one?
Okay.
My name is Panagiotis Tziachris, and I'm here to talk again about Greece, but from a different perspective. We zoom out a little bit. We try to shift the time scale and see the big picture. Okay. We know that NSDI creation is a long-term evolving process without certain and a priori defined result, and it's important to open and thoroughly consider both long-term trajectories and short-term trends. Observe, learn, and adapt, and change in order to implement a viable NSDI. Tracing the Greek NSDI trajectory is an effort trying to discover what, how, and why regarding Greek NSDI, and could give possible helpful results both for Greece and for INSPIRE itself. We defined 3 time periods for the Greek SDI evolution, different time periods. The first one, up to 2000, it's the pre-SDI era. The second is from 2000 to around 2008 or 2010. It's the first Greek NSDI effort. Then we have the last effort that we just heard from 2010 to 2013 with the abolition of Haico. If we want to briefly show the interest regarding SDI during these periods, we have the pre-SDI no interest at all, the first Greek SDI effort, a lot of interest that ended along with the effort, and then we had the second effort that was a lot of interest again. I try briefly to show these 3 different time periods. The pre-SDI, widespread use of GIS and spatial data. However, there were some main issues like isolation, reluctance for cooperation between the public sector organizations. This is, for example, a graph showing teams forming the Greek GIS community and the connections between them. And this is the graph that shows the public sector organizations and their connections, and the academic teams and their connections. Okay. Also, other problems is that the participants had a limited disciplinary background during that period, mainly engineers that were focusing on data and applications. However, we had a lot of data quality issues, an upset of periodical data updating mechanisms, ad hoc system introductions with no previous planning in the GIS era we are now, with pre-SDI we're talking, limitation strategy, unified approach, coordinating consultative frameworks, and inadequacy in the spatial debate, again focusing on applications and data. The first Greek NSDI effort, 2000-2008, funded by Third Community Structural Funds, Third CSF, and concerned the creation of a national spatial data infrastructure. The organizational structure mainly was a Secretariat for Information Society, or SIS, was responsible for the management of all this, along with other organizations for the technical support and the measurement and evaluation. However, there was a specific group, the GeoInfo Scientific Committee, for the scientific consultation on the subject of NSDI, that had to implement 4 reports, one for the general concept of NSDI, the second about the technical aspects, the third about the policies, and the fourth about the expected deliverables from this project. According to the SIS, this effort was rather successful. Multiple projects were funded, cost-effective and time-efficient way. On the other hand, Greece is one of the few member states of the European Union that does not have an SDI, according to a lot of different reports, 2008, 2009, 2010. Why this happened? Some reasons. First of all, Greece was not ready to embrace SDI, not mature enough. The legacy for the pre-SDI period still prevails. So mainly if there wasn't for the third CSF, there wouldn't be any real interest in SDI in Greece. Along with that, we have problems regarding the public sector, general problems, bureaucracy, corruption, discrepancy between formal and informal practices, but also related to NSDI problems, like the distorted perspective, myopic perceptions, as biographers say, of what is important and what not in respect to NSDI. Also, ownership of the data. They thought that the organization of the data is an asset of their own, so there was unwillingness to share, inability to cooperate, lack of trained personnel, prone to political pressure. All this resembles the cynical organizations in the standalone stages of SDI development that Valendent states. Also, there was a coordination organizational issues, like the SIS, the leader, mainly had efficient-centric management, IT approach, neither the intention nor the expertise for NSDI coordinator. It was a short-term role only for the third CSF. The GeoInfo, the scientific advisors, again had non-institutional role, no real power, advisor and supporting role, and also a short-term one. Design and concept. It was mainly focused on technology and data with tons of over-optimistic assumptions and remarks, lack of conception of the complex and evolving nature of NSDI, leaving out all other using advantages of NSDI during that period, lack of more inclusive approach, people component, organizational aspects and issues, and also there were some inconsistencies in the proposed roadmap. So this effort could be characterized as the third generation NSDI in the technical and partially the journalistic phase of development with pro-innovation bias. Implementation problems regarding the GeoInfo Society. From the 4 reports responsible to deliver, only one was fully implemented, the general concept regarding NSDI. The second, about the technical aspects, was partially implemented. The other were never implemented at all. And also, SIS really didn't use any NSDI reports or rules at all. So, for the first effort, Greece neither ready nor interested in NSDI, lack of understanding and knowledge regarding NSDI, a simplistic, deterministic, data technocentric approach, the horseless carriage syndrome, the NSDI through the lens of the paradigm that had been dominant for years, the GIS. So they addressed NSDI as a bigger, more complex GIS, both as a concept and as design and implementation. And also very limited public discussion and research regarding this first effort and SDI in general. The second Greek NSDI effort, 2008-2013, started 2008 by Hellenic Mapping and Cadastral Organization, HEMCO, that was responsible to formulate a new grid law that transposed the inspired directive into the national legislation and established the appropriate structures and mechanisms for coordinating this new effort. Ended 2013 with question mark, officially is not ended. The Ministry of Environment is responsible now, but we had this year the abolition of HEMCO. if you want to say something about this effort, we can say that it's a totally new approach. A vigorous effort, a lot of things happened, as explained before. However, we have to keep in mind some things. First of all, that the spatial environments in Greece was still not ready or mature to embrace SDI overall. And also the problems regarding the public sector still existed like there was in the previous eras, the previous periods. Now, briefly, we try to see organizational and conceptual issues during this second effort. First of all, there is not an integrated report regarding NSDI that covers every aspect of NSDI. So we try to figure out some things based on the law and based on the reports that HEMCO sent to the European Union. In these reports, there is this organization structure. This organization structure has HEMCO in the middle. HEMCO recommends, proposes, supports, creates, maintains, updates, supervises, represents, appoints, coordinates, informs, helps. HEMCO does everything. It's a centralized structure built around HEMCO. Then you have the NSDI itself. The NSDI itself is depicted as the sum of the National Geoportal, a report about the policies of data in the public sector, and a report about the technical aspects of data in the public sector. This is a rather limited approach towards NSDI if we see the bibliography. Then you have the participants themselves. This is very interesting because you can see that the participants are separated from the NSDI itself. They are not directly connected. And you have HEMCO as the gatekeeper that regulates who enters and who leaves NSDI. Okay, that's an interesting concept. Apart from that, you have every organization under HEMCO. Everyone is the same for HEMCO. It's like a black box, one size fits all. So there's no question if an organization can deliver, is ready to deliver, or want to deliver. Everyone must deliver the same. And also, there are these focal points that try to help. However, it's a very hard task for them. It's employees inside organizations that try to help this structure along with their everyday jobs and without having real institutional power. Apart from that, we have the National Information Committee, the political organ that try to support this. We have the Prime Minister and the Minister of Environment. We have the European Union and some thematic working groups that I don't know if they really worked. And all this structure is believed to work based on the law enforcement. But we know that passing laws achieves little if there's no capacity for undertaking the detailed work and developing programs that move step by step towards strategic objectives. These are the key points altogether for someone who wants to see it later on. So let's go to the implementation. Implementation is more or less a three-step, we can say. First was the law and the organizational structure that the law described. Then we have the building of the network itself, the effort to build this network, this new network. And later on it was going to be the design, the later phase, and the implementation of NSDI through outsourcing and competitive binding process. However, in the second step, everything ended with the abolition of HEMCO. Why this happened? There could be many reasons. However, we believe that one of the main reasons was that HEMCO ignored the installed base. As you can imagine, the public sector already had a network already established with different organizations, with different powers and hierarchies and connection between them. And suddenly HEMCO came and tried to change this, not with alignment and negotiation and translation and inscription, but try to do it more with force and power. And as we know, power is not some kind of reservoir which people deploy, not given a priori. And this led to conflicts, led to aggressiveness and confrontation opposition, especially between HEMCO and the big organization like the Hellenic Military Geographical Service or the cadastre, the Greek cadastre. And we know that the installed base is a powerful actor. Its future cannot be consciously designed. This could be a main reason why HEMCO was abolished. Could be. Could be other also. Another interesting point is that HEMCO really copied the Inspire agenda and schedule. They didn't have their own strategy. And this is an interesting concept and have a lot of issues and create some problems in the implementation. So the key points of this era: Greece, neither ready, issues inadequacies, public sector, spatial environment, limited understanding and knowledge regarding SDI again, simplistic deterministic approach based on law this time more, very limited public debate and research regarding advanced SDI issues. This could be considered similar, they were similar in the first effort. But in the first effort was the technology more, that technocentric approach. Here it's more based on the law. They are quite similar. Greek NSDI and Inspire. You have to say that Inspire had a great impact and major effect on NSDI in Greece. If there wasn't the Inspire obligation, there wouldn't be any second effort for Greek NSDI. So, Inspire must pay attention to contradictive signals. You have on one hand, Inspire talks about step-by-step processes, cultivation approaches, and on the other hand, you have the implementation, which is design and hard deadlines and schedules. This gives contradictive signals to at least to Greece. And also, Inspire need to focus more on the local context. We have so much differences between countries. The SDI are in different generations. The SDIs are different approaches, cultivation, design, first generation, second generation, process, product, so much differences, and maybe somehow Inspire must take this into consideration. Conclusion and discussion. We see there are common core problems regarding Greek NSDI that seem to repeat, and the similar mindset and approaches lead to the same dead ends. Proposals. First of all, clearly and honestly observe and disclose and face our weaknesses. And second, enhance and support learning and transforming capabilities, as Sibora said, not just as countries, but Inspire also itself. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Very important, in particular, regarding your recommendations and your conclusions. It's something we should take into the agenda of what we are doing for implementation and maintenance. Yes, look to all the local, let's say, diversities.
Mm-hmm. Any question? Yeah.
Any other question from the audience before giving to the previous speaker? No?
Thanks very much for the presentation. I've read the paper, which is based on, and I think it's a very interesting approach. I'm just not sure how much it is quite influenced by the theory behind it, and how much is grounded on the empirics. And I'll just mention two issues. The first thing is that during the second phase of implementation, there was a quite substantial number of workshops that took place within EP, which is the educational or the training authority for the public sector in Greece, and there was also effort to push the competency as to the actual coordination into the focal points rather than HEMCO. So it was inevitable for HEMCO to try to push for the whole thing because, as you said, it was a new approach. So there needed to be a quite strong will in changing this one, and having in mind that quite a few of the deadlines in the Inspire schedule are inflexible by definition. I mean, you get a fine if you don't do it, or you highlight the risk. I understand what you're saying. I mean, I'm coming from the same theoretical paradigm. I would really like to see all actants, technical, social, physical persons to be there, but I just don't see how it can be done differently. And I'm really thinking, how could it be that you engage more the actors other than through these public consultations and everything? I mean, what else could be done?
First of all, I agree with you that the situation was very difficult. Imagine that you have a country with really no NSDI or knowledge regarding NSDI, and suddenly in 3 months they have to do some things, to implement things. So there's a certain conflict. Of course, the national government will choose to implement to implement the Inspire directives. I understand this. But this creates a major problem, that you don't really create an SDI. You just create something that meet every demand, but that's not an SDI. So here I don't have a solution. Okay, I understand it's a major problem. I don't want to be in your position. It's a very difficult position. You have a fail solution. If you try to implement an SDI, you won't be compatible. But if you try to be compatible, you won't create an SDI. It's a fail. So I understand you. I don't have a solution for this, as you can imagine. Now about the users. The thing that I would do a little bit different is that there was, and there still is, a lot of focus on data aspect. This is very important. Data is the beginning of everything. It's very important, but you should also start working in different aspects that are away from data. That's for example, you have to do an assessment if they can deliver. There are you can capacity assessment, capacity development. There are some procedures, but not focusing all too much in data. That's my main concern. But I understand it was a fail solution for everyone, even who tried, not just for Hemco, everyone who tried to implement. The issue here is why Hemco was abolished. That's the main question. Could be this, but it could be also that the effort to try to implement and be compatible with Inspire made too much aggressiveness and too much haste from Hemco that led to collisions and confrontation. Yeah. Okay, it's a complicated issue. Okay.
It's very complicated. I think we need to move also because there is still a presenter that will suffer from the fact that people may start going for it instead of staying here. I think it's something to be, let's say, maybe raise the issues and discuss also in the frame of the implementation and maintenance, and to see later. So the last presenter, Tomislav Ciceli.
Yes, it's a long way.
Okay, after this, I would say, hard presentation from Greece, I will try to say something about capacity building in Croatia. I'm Tomislav Ciceli, I'm coming from State Geodetic Administration. And the motivation for this presentation came from two questions that we received from our stakeholders, our subjects. One of them said, okay, we are sharing our data with regional countries. We describe our data with metadata. We are aware of what is Inspire, but can you explain us what is NSDI? That was the first question that we raised, and that was from a meteorological institute. They were aware of everything, but were not aware of NSDI. And another question arises from one local municipality which said, yes, of course, we are NSDI stakeholder, we have data which is in the scope of NSDI, we will help to get you that data, but at the end we finished our discussion with question, can you help us to understand what does special data means? So when you receive questions like that, you become aware that capacity building and awareness raising measure will never end. It is never-ending story. So that was the motivation for this presentation. At the beginning of this, I will grab this opportunity to remind you that from the last year, the European Union became richer for 1,244 islands, and like you see, one of them is really full of love. Another thing I would like to grab your attention is that from last year, the European Union became richer also for one more national contact point, and that is SGA, which represents National Mapping and Cadastral Agency in Croatia. Among other things that we do in SGA, we are also responsible for establishment of NSDI, and we are trying generally to build geo-enabled society, helping government to use and share their special data. Scope of this presentation is somewhere here. Like you see, we are aware of human capacity. We even put it in our law somewhere. that human resources are really important for building NSDI. And in the scope of that, we are doing some activities that in later slides will be shown. But before that, I would like to say that we also have strong legacy in this field, which came from our first law, which was from 2007, which also has defined NSDI. And in the scope of that law, we also managed to organize some workshops. We also had free NSDI and Inspire days. But new cycle of activities in that field came from the last year when we transposed Inspire directive to our law. Okay, so what then? First, I believe that all of you who are doing with NSDI establishment are aware that workshops are the main tool for transfer knowledge to public sector or to people who are dealing with special information in public sector. In the scope of that, in Croatia, we managed to organize 6 of them. They are, like I said, legacy of activities which were held before this, and there are different structure of attendees, but you can see that usually this represents public sector. Public sector people are always the main attendees of our workshops. Number of people is usually driven by scope of this workshop. For example, this one was also public presentation of our law, so discussion was mainly in broader audience. Last week we have a workshop with Professor Komforts and Danny Vanderberg regarding monitoring and reporting, so we had a little bit smaller number of attendees. But we are managed to have a continuous activity in the field of workshop. Another activity which is really important in the scope of sharing knowledge and awareness raising measures is conferences. We managed to organize 6, this year we will have 6 NSDI and Inspire days. 2 years ago, in scope of Inspiration Project, we managed to organize a regional conference, which was also in the field of SDI, and we have many events, and they were all involved in somehow to SDI. Last year we organized also conference in Šibenik, where we had GRC like co-partner organizing a workshop for enlargement countries. And the structure from our attendees is usually we have this number of attendees on our conferences. We are not so big community, maybe like in some other countries. This is a structure of people from different sector, and you see dominant part is usually public sector, but also academia, real sector that represent real sector, green academia, and non-profit organizations are also involved in our conferences. Presentation structure, we also had international colleagues on our local SDI days, so we are managed to organize conferences which are becoming more and more not so nationally organized, nationally focused, but also, how to say, regionally. And the last thing that is also important to us, and I would like to pay attention to you, is that we have also managed to publish some brochures. One of them was published together with Inspiration Project, but we also proud on our website, which is, how to say, central point of all information what is going on in Croatia with NSDI. It is bilingual. Also in the scope of Inspiration, we managed to produce one interesting movie. I will not show you the whole one. You can find it on our website. Which also help us to share idea what does special data means. Here are some statistics, and on some of them we can be really proud that, for example, from 2012 to 2013, we can see that there is a 24% more visits to our website. So we can say that idea of NSDI is spreading according to this statistic. And all those activities were organized in the last 2 years. And they were mainly organized by our institution, like institution which is leading SDI establishment in Croatia. And some kind of conclusion. I believe that you all are aware that it's very hard to say something specific conclusion in the scope of capacity building and awareness raising measure. There is always conclusion that it needed more. So I believe all conclusions are pretty general, and there is no real way to measure did you succeed in this field or didn't not. But maybe this could be one of idea how to measure did we succeed or not. This is the first time that Croatia monitored establishment of NSDI and reported that to European Commission. These are results compared with results from other countries from last year, and from this slide you can see that we are somewhere in the middle. We are not the worst, we are not the best, but it seems that we are on the right track. And the final thought, we are pretty aware of this thing that only way we can succeed to establish SDI is to help our stakeholders to succeed in fulfilling their obligation to SDI. And that's all for me. If you're interested to see what is going on in Croatian SDI, you are always welcome to come to our website. It is bilingual, so thank you.
Thank you. Very impressive what was done within such a short time. Any question from the audience? Still in conditions to ask for a question? Yeah?
I didn't see it, but did you work with the private sector to help people and train people?
Yes, from time to time we have people from public sector, from private sector to help us to, for example, to say something about technology in the scope of these workshops. Okay, private sector is always involved. We also, colleague Ljevka helped me to say that we also have working groups in which we are also involved, people from private sector. So private sector is involved in SDI establishment in Croatia from different aspects, from being part of formal framework, which is in the form of working groups, but also in the field of knowledge transfer and capacity building, helping us to share some knowledge which is rather specific in some field. So they are involved.
Okay, because I think NSDI is everybody in a country. I mean, so the private sector and
yes, of course,
academic sector needs to be involved as well. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. I guess there are no more questions. We are very much delayed. So thank you all for being here, for having your participation until all that late. Thank you.